Once upon a time, owning an album was a sacred ritual. You didn't just listen, you experienced it. You memorized the track list, studied the artwork, knew the credits. Albums like Michael Jackson's Thriller or Whitney Houston's debut album weren't just records, they were events, eras, identity. Today, these same cultural landmarks are vanishing, not physically, but in meaning and prominence in the way we interact with them. Classic albums are being lost, not just from store shelves, but from memory. Streaming promised unlimited access, but ironically, it caused some of the most important music in the history to become invisible. Take the Wu-Tang Clan's 1993 debut album, Enter the 36 Chambers. Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. Once considered essential listening for any hip-hop fan, it rarely surfaces on curated playlists or algorithm-driven suggestions. It's still technically available on platforms, but it's buried beneath newer, shinier content. You need to seek it out, and many younger listeners simply never stumble across it. Even Michael Jackson's post-Thriller work has suffered. Albums like Dangerous and History contain some of his most experimental, political, and emotional raw music, but they've just faded away in the public eye, overshadowed by Thriller's legacy and the broader shifts in pop culture. When was the last time you heard Stranger in Moscow in a playlist, or Earth Song recommended by algorithm? And then there's Aaliyah, whose catalog was entangled in legal disputes for 2 decades. For years, One in a Million and her self-titled album were unavailable on streaming platforms entirely until a 2021 release revived them. But that gap meant that for years, a cornerstone of R&B history was absent from digital culture. The physical album once meant everything. Owning a Whitney Houston record meant more than just hearing her voice. It meant holding the iconic cover, reading her thank yous, seeing the production credits from Clive Davis to Narada, Michael Walden. But with the decline of physical media, we lost not just sound, but context. Albums like Whitney's I'm Your Baby Tonight or Janet Jackson's The Velvet Rope were full statements, emotionally complex, genre blending, and cohesive in ways you don't feel when tracks are plucked apart and tossed into random playlists. Even with reissues, and some albums can be truly revived. The Wu-Tang Clan secret album Once Upon a Time in Shaolin was sold in a private buyer and kept from the public eye for years. That album literally disappeared, not due to obscurity or neglect, but by design. It became a luxury artifact instead of a piece of living music. Spotify doesn't care if Michael Jackson's changed pop music forever or that Lawrence Hill's miseducation defined a generation. It cares about engagement metrics. If listeners don't click, skip, or save fast enough, the algorithm drops the song like it never existed. That's how Michael's Off the Wall, a funk soul masterpiece, often gets ignored in favor of Billie Jean or Beat It. The hits, deep cuts like I Can't Help It or Burn the Disco Out are cultural gold, yet completely lost to those who never hear full albums. The same goes for Whitney Houston's My Love Is Your Love, a stunning late career reinvention, blending R&B with reggae and hip-hop. It gets buried underneath I Will Always Love You and karaoke culture, never truly appreciated in full. In 2008, a fire ripped through the Universal Studios vault in Los Angeles, lost in the blaze. Master tapes from artists like Nirvana, Aretha Franklin, Louis Armstrong, and yes, Michael Jackson. Original recordings gone forever. And when you lose the masters, you lose the ability to properly remaster, reissue, or revisit these albums in full fidelity. For some works, that means the best version of the album no longer exists. Worse, the industry often fails to protect lesser-known works. TLC's Fan Mail or Missy Elliott's Under Construction game-changing albums in their time now exist in digital formats, often compressed or altered from the original release. Classic albums don't just fade away because of technology. They fade away because we stopped talking about them. And to ask someone today about Whitney's second album, or MJ's History's Disc 2, or Wu-Tang's Iron Flag, these albums were vital, personal to millions, but if they're not boosted by documentaries, TikToks, or viral moments, they dissolve from the cultural conversation. This is how legacy gets rewritten. When a new listener searches for Whitney Houston, the algorithm feeds them I Want to Dance for Somebody, a great song by the way, but not the whole picture. The album isn't just a product, it's a canvas, and describes to be preserved, protected, and re-experienced. Artists like Kendrick Lamar, Beyonce, and Frank Ocean are still crafting albums as statements. Lemonade, To Pimp a Butterfly, Bond. These works prove that long-form music still has culture power. but it's up to us, listeners, curators, platforms, to fight for the format. Let's not let albums like Thriller, The Bodyguard, 36 Chambers, or Dangerous become footnotes. Let's listen from start to finish, loud, on good speakers, with intention. Because in a world of infinite music, the danger is forgetting when we already had. Once upon a time, the debut album was everything. It was a statement of intent, an artist's first chance to etch their name into the culture conversation. It wasn't just an introduction, it was a manifesto. And some of the most iconic albums in music history were debuts. But somewhere along the line, that changed. Today, artists release dozens of singles, EPs, TikTok snippets, and YouTube freestyles before the term debut album even enters the picture. And when it finally does, it often feels more like a playlist than a project, more like a product than a statement. So what really happened to the power of the debut album? Where did it go? And more importantly, what did we lose when it disappeared? In 1994, a 20-year-old kid from Queensbridge named Nas released his debut album, Illmatic. It was only 10 tracks long, but those 10 tracks, they changed rap forever. Illmatic wasn't just a debut, it was a cinematic, street poetic masterpiece. Every beat was handcrafted by legendary producers DJ Premier, Pete Rock, Q-Tip, and Large Professor. Every bar felt like a gospel, but more than anything, it was focused, intentional, a vision from a hungry artist with something to prove. It was an accumulation of years of writing, observing, crafting rhymes, not the result of chasing the algorithm, and Nas was alone. Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, that was released in 1998, won 5 Grammys and blended hip-hop, soul, reggae, and gospel in a way no one has ever did. Kanye West, The College Dropout, which released in 2004, redefined what it meant to be a mainstream rapper without street cred, clever, emotional, unafraid to be vulnerable. Guns N' Roses, The Appetite for Destruction, which was released in 1987, introduced the world to a gritty, dangerous sound that dragged rock back to its dirty roots. 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, which was released in 2003, was a nuclear bomb, like a hurricane coming. Gangsta rap at its most cinematic and commercially explosive state. These weren't first albums, these were events. The debut album used to mean pressure, years of writing, years of rejection, years of hunger packed into 40 minutes. Artists often had their entire lives to make that first album, and it showed. There was urgency, vision, grit. A debut album wasn't just a label rollout, it was identity crystallized. Who you were, where you came from, and what you had to say to the world. Think about it. Kendrick Lamar's Section 80 laid the groundwork for the Compton's Prophet we meet in Good Kid, Mad City. The Clash debut gave voice to working class rage in Thatcher's Britain. Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style defined the G-Funk era with laid-back swagger and Dr. Dre's lush production. These albums mattered because the artists had something real to say, and the industry gave them the space to say it. So what happened? Why have debut albums started to feel like afterthoughts? In a word, the internet. The streaming era flipped everything. Artists no longer needed a full album to make an impact. One viral TikTok, one YouTube video, one 15-second snippet, and you're in the spotlight. Labels noticed. Instead of grooming talent for years, they signed viral moments, and the debut album became less about artistic identity and more about capitalizing on momentum. Add that to the playlist culture. Albums are no longer the primary format of discovery. Instead, artists release a string of singles and EPs until they get traction, then bundle them up into an album later. The result? Many debut albums were rushed, unfocused, and algorithm driven. It's not about what you want to say anymore. It's about what works. Today's artists are under immense pressure to stay visible, drop consistently or constantly, go viral, stay trending. But the debut album used to be the product of silence, of reflection, of crafting something worth waiting for. Artists like D'Angelo waited years before releasing Brown Sugar. Jay-Z didn't drop Reasonable Doubt until he was 26. Frank Ocean spent years perfecting Chanel Orange. Now, young artists are often penalized for waiting. Fans move on. Algorithms forget. And before your artistry has a chance to evolve, you're expected to perform. So, instead of one strong debut, many artists drop 3 or 4 minute albums, learning in real time, instead of coming out the gate with a vision. But here's the thing. We still need great albums, great debut albums, because they anchored the legacy. They tell us who the artist was before the fame, before the compromises, before the expectations. Debut albums are time capsules. They capture the moment before the moment. They remind us what happens when an artist is allowed to be bold, intentional, and unapologetically themselves. We've seen glimpses of this in recent years. Like, for example, J.I.D.'s Never Story gave Atlanta something lyrically fresh. Billie Eilish, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go was bold, dark, and nothing like her peers. Little Simz, A Curious Tale of Trials plus Persons, was a powerful feminist statement wrapped in lyrical dexterity. These albums prove that when you give an artist space, time, and purpose, the debut album still hits different. In a world obsessed with what's next, maybe it's time we fall back in love with what's first. The debut album isn't dead, it's just been buried under noise. And when the dust settles, we'll remember why it mattered, because you only get one chance to say, this is who I am. Let that first statement mean something again.